Joining me is the political panel, Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now is Director of GXO Strategies, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Michael, Clive Palmer, what difference will he make?
I think he'll make a difference at the margin. I'm not as sure that he's going to have the influence that you think, Andrew. I think he could also affect Dutton. Remember, yes, his preferences, the majority of them flow to the Conservatives or the coalition, but not all of them. I think last election, about 30% drifted off everywhere else. In some of those marginal seats that Dutton needs to win, that could be a factor. So, I think he's thrown a wild card into this. It's just amazing. Most, I suppose, rich people in their midlife crises or late life crises go and buy Ferraris or, something of substance. He goes and buys political parties and tries to run. I just don't understand what his strategy is. I don't think those messages will cut through. He had very similar sorts of messages last time round and, it fizzed out. But I think it means minority government's almost a certain. The issue is which party will have the majority in that minority. And that's the real worry. This could go anywhere.
No, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's going to have a huge influence at all. I think his time is gone. But in a very, very tight election, 2 or 3% could really turn it. And as for the preferences, I've got to say, he also took a lot of Labor working class votes, and I think that explains why not all the preferences went to the Liberals. Clive Palmer, what difference do you think he'll make, Cameron?
Well, it's the sheer weight of the ad buy. I mean, $100 million dropped into our market will actually touch the sides and actually crowd everyone else's message out, and has the opportunity to potentially, as he's done in previous elections, actually raise issues that are uncomfortable for the major parties to deal with. So I think there will be influence around some issues. To Michael's point, I agree. I think Michael, he's not going to get anyone else elected, but that's not the metric he's going after. He wants to be noticed. He wants to have influence. And I think $100 million will buy him a seat at the table.
It'll sure buy him a lot of noise. That's, I think, his main aim.
Exactly,
but Michael,
exactly.
To the big story today. The South Australian government putting the Whyalla Steelworks into administration. I mean, I said at the top of the show, this is utter humiliation for the Premier and for Energy Minister Chris Bowen, Albanese's Energy Minister, who bought that snake oil. The steelworks could be saved by green hydrogen and threw millions and millions of dollars at this project. Your take?
I was quite amazed at that press conference. I think the beginning of it was fine. Yeah, clearly he didn't want to spend any more money propping up something that's clearly a money pit. But then halfway through, he starts talking about carbonising steel.
Oh, I mean, my God, yes.
Steel is fundamentally carbon. I mean, for every tonne of steel, it's 2 tonnes of carbon. And not only that, you need 3/4 of a tonne of coking coal. The guy's out in fairyland if he thinks he's going to decarbonise steel. And if that's the attitude they're going into this, I dread tomorrow's announcement. They're just going to throw more money at something that's doomed to fail. Green hydrogen cannot functionally, operate a steel plant. That's the reality of it. It's not been done anywhere in the world. And getting rid of carbon out of steel is just a fantasy. I don't know what planet these people are on. All these green jobs they like talking about, they're always subsidised and really productive jobs that require just access to efficient resources, they undermine. So, Andrew, I dread for the future of Whyalla, because the best you're going to get out of this is some short-term fix for the election. And after that, somebody's going to have to clean up the mess. And it is a mess. And South Australia is probably the worst of the mess in terms of energy. They blew up their coal plant, as you remember, and they're left in a position where they can't have. We're deindustrialising Australia. That's all we're doing.
You would think after such a hugely expensive lesson they would have learned. They're just blaming the jockey when the horse called green hydrogen is it's right for the knackery. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're going to give, green hydrogen horse another gallop. I mean, it's incredible. What do you make of all this, Cameron? Is it going to feed into the election at all? What do you make of it?
Well, I think Whyalla doesn't sit in a marginal seat, but 3,000 people's jobs rely on this decision. So government better get it right. But I agree with both of you. I mean, green hydrogen is something that works in a lab, mainly, maybe. Doesn't work at industrial scale, isn't anywhere else in the world. There is coking coal that does the job, coking coal from Queensland especially, that does the job around the world to make steel. Look, green hydrogen is a bad idea, and if that's the future for Whyalla, I really do hope, as Michael says, that that's not what's going to be promised by Albo tomorrow, because that would be a disaster for those 3,000 people and their livelihoods. Let's get back to making steel with coal the way the rest of the world does and the way we've done. If they do, Andrew, it'd be terrible. It'd be terrible.
Oh, look, the whole thing is a walking, talking disaster. And what's more infuriating is that they don't even learn the lessons now. I mean, God's help this country. Michael, yesterday the Reserve Bank cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years, but by just 0.25%, or $2.60 a day for someone with a $500,000 mortgage. I thought the Treasurer last night wasn't confident on the ABC that this would actually save the government. Here he is.
Does this single measure on inflation, do you think, do enough in the voters' minds to offset the collapse in their living standards?
Well, I think that remains to be seen, to be frank about it.
Michael, what did you make of all that?
Well, that's just absolutely ridiculous. You know, a 25 basis point cut in mortgage rates is somehow going to offset the pain they've gone through for the last 4 years. It's just, it's a nonsensical question, a nonsensical answer. But that aside, I said earlier that, you know, one of the worst things that could have happened for this government is actually to get this interest rate cut now rather than in April, because they're now facing the prospect that they call an April election, and the Reserve Bank made it pretty clear that it was a line ball decision yesterday, and they won't increase or cut interest rates in the April meeting, which means they're in the middle of an election campaign with interest rates on hold. So their whole economic narrative falls apart. And, you know, those figures today in terms of wages show that...
point.
Well, that's what I said earlier.
I hadn't heard anyone make that point. That's a very good point, Michael. I hadn't considered that. Yes, indeed. In the middle of the election, I thought maybe, you know, there was a chance there'd be even a second cut then, but absolutely not. As you say, it's remarkable that they actually cut this time. And there was something else, Cameron, in that interview I found curious. Even hours after the Reserve Bank announcement, hours after the government was handed what it hopes is a lifeline in this election, Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, still hadn't talked to Albanese. Have a listen.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister since the announcement?
No, we've had an exchange, but I haven't spoken to him yet. Obviously, I'll have the opportunity to do that before long.
Cameron Milner, are you surprised?
Well, I mean, the talk around Canberra is the estrangement between the Treasurer and the Prime Minister. I mean, the Prime Minister was talking about his nuptials today rather than the economy. I mean, this guy has been off doing Coca Cabana, everything else. I mean, Jim's trying to right the ship. Jim's trying to deliver a budget. Jim's trying to talk about the economy and jobs and economy. And every other day, his Prime Minister's off on some other frolic. So, look, there's definitely estrangement between the two. But for 5 hours after the RBA governor, and not to have a conversation, I'm glad that Jim told the truth and fessed up that there wasn't a conversation, because it tells us just how bad that estrangement must be.
Very interesting, I thought. Yes, thank you. Michael Costa, Cameron Milner, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it. Good chat.